They're going to win. They're going to win big. And a defeat in that building behind me, the Royal Courts of Justice, will cost Harry millions. Millions that he hasn't got. If Harry loses, which the Mail think he will, it will further damage his reputation. It will erode any remaining credibility that he may have, and it will clean him out financially, which, be clear, will place further pressure on that crumbling marriage.
The case is officially wrapped up. No more arguments, no more back and forth. The evidence is all in, and now it's sitting in the hands of the judge, Mr. Justice Nicken, who's stepping away to craft his final decision. He already made it clear this won't be quick. He's locking in full time over the Easter period to break everything down and piece it all together. After 11 intense weeks in court, what he's dealing with is no clean story. It's messy, layered, and honestly kind of all over the place. The record is packed with complicated details, including flirtatious Facebook messages that raised eyebrows and added even more drama to the situation. On top of that, there's a key witness who straight up turned around and rejected his own statement, throwing even more confusion into an already wild case. There's been no shortage of wild moments in this case. One royal editor didn't hold back at all, calling the allegations against her a greater fiction than war and peace, making it sound like pure fantasy instead of fact. Inside the courtroom, emotions were running high. There were tears on the stand, tense exchanges with the judge, and even a former Daily Mail editor admitting that the pressure pushed him to the edge. He said in his final testimony that some of those long, early morning sessions left him feeling straight-up rage. Behind the scenes, the Daily Mail team is moving like they already see the finish line. People close to the case say their legal side is feeling strongly confident about winning this, based on how everything unfolded and the evidence laid out in court. It's not a guaranteed victory. Nothing ever is in situations like this. But that confidence is being described as serious and hard to ignore. If that confidence actually plays out, the fallout for Harry could hit hard, really hard. Financially, losing could mean millions gone in legal costs and possibly damages, and that's not money he can just brush off easily. But the bigger hit might be his image, because if the judge decides his testimony doesn't hold up or suggests the case leaned on shaky or made-up claims, that kind of ruling could seriously shake how people see him moving forward. And it doesn't just stop at personal damage. This could shake things at a much bigger level. Losing a case built around claims that the press acted unlawfully, especially after the Charlotte Griffith messages and the Gavin Burroughs reversal became public, could seriously weaken the whole narrative that's been driving the Sussex campaign for years. Now looking closer at the key parts of the case, the Charlotte Griffith situation stands out big time. Harry told the court they only met once, that he found out the next day she was a journalist, spoke to a friend about it, and that was the end. No more contact, nothing else. But the Facebook messages that later came out tell a completely different story, and they don't look minor at all. Those messages show an ongoing, friendly, and clearly flirtatious connection that stretched over months. There are mentions of movie snuggles, a nickname she gave him, plans around shared social events, and even Harry giving her his phone number, details that go way beyond a one-time meeting. It paints a picture that feels much closer and more involved than what was described in court, and it gets even more specific. Some of those messages reference making polite conversation with unfamiliar people at a dinner while asking them for charity donations. When that detail is matched against official records, it appears to line up with a 𝗣𝗿𝗍 dinner Harry hosted at Clarence House on December 5, 2011, adding another layer that ties those private messages directly to real-world events. Griffith's testimony hit in a completely different way, and it carried serious weight. She told the court that during her social connections with members of the royal family, she found out that Princess Catherine was expecting her first child days before St. James's Palace made it public. That's huge news, one of the biggest royal stories of that decade, and she chose not to publish it. Think about that for a second. She was sitting on a headline that could have blown up globally, but she held back because she drew a firm line between her work and her private relationships. She made it clear she knew exactly where that boundary was, and she didn't cross it, even when the payoff could have been massive. That moment in court did more than just add detail. It reshaped how she was seen. It showed she had real professional discipline and wasn't just chasing headlines. Instead of using insider access for gain, she chose loyalty, which made her come across as someone who could actually be trusted with sensitive information. and that creates a direct clash with how Harry's side seemed to frame her. In his witness statement, there's an underlying suggestion that her role as a journalist made her unsafe to be around socially. But that argument starts to fall apart when you look at her track record. If anything, her actions point in the opposite direction. Then things took an even sharper turn. Harry's legal team reportedly suggested in closing that Griffith may have made up the story about knowing of Catherine's pregnancy early, hinting at a pattern of exaggerating her royal connections. That's a bold claim to throw at a journalist with decades of experience covering the royal family. Griffith pushed back on that accusation firmly, refusing to let it stand.
Further pressure on that crumbling marriage. Going to lose this case because he's made a claim about Charlotte Griffith and the nature of their friendship, and then the messages tell a different. Harry claims that he cut off all contact with her when he discovered that she was
Harry's private life. That kind of testimony was supposed to be a cornerstone of the case. But when Burroughs actually appeared, everything flipped in a way no one saw coming. He completely rejected the statement tied to his name. He told the court it had nothing to do with him, that he didn't recognize it at all, and even pointed out that the signature didn't look real, saying it appeared to be copied or traced. That's a serious accusation to make under oath. He went even further, claiming the case built around his supposed evidence was a pack of lies, which instantly raised the stakes. And it didn't stop there. Burroughs said he only became aware of this statement when he saw it mentioned in a newspaper about a year and a half later, describing the whole situation as a kind of staged narrative that didn't reflect reality. For a witness expected to support the foundation of the case to come out and say that, it's a massive shock to the entire process. In any legal battle, a key witness backing away like this is a big deal. But here, it could be devastating. If the judge concludes that a central piece of evidence wasn't genuine or wasn't actually from Burroughs, it raises serious questions about the strength of the entire claim. And once credibility starts to crack, everything built on top of it becomes harder to defend. At the end of the day, the judge isn't deciding this on absolute certainty, but on what's more likely true than not. Even with that lower civil standard, the challenge is clear. Harry's version of events has to come across as more convincing overall. And moments like this make that path a lot more complicated. For each of the 14 specific articles from the Daily Mail and Mail on Sunday that Harry is challenging, the judge has a very focused job. He has to decide whether the information in those stories was gathered through unlawful means or not. Every single piece is being looked at closely, and nothing is getting a free pass. The Daily Mail has stayed consistent with its defense from start to finish. Their argument is simple but strong. They claim the information didn't come from shady tactics, but from legitimate sources. More specifically, they've pointed the finger in a different direction, saying some of the details actually came from people within Harry's own social circle. That shifts the narrative in a big way, suggesting it wasn't aggressive investigation but conversations and connections that led to those stories. And here's the key point. If the judge agrees with that explanation, then the whole argument about unlawful behavior starts to fall apart. There's nothing illegal about journalists receiving information from people who are willing to share it, and that's a major factor in how this case could swing. 𝗣𝗿𝗶𝗰𝗲, the Daily Mail's royal editor, someone widely recognized and respected in her field, also stepped in with testimony that directly pushed back against the claims made about her reporting.
Goes nuts. And it's interesting because talking about going nuts, Harry lost control to such an extent where he's not just blabbing on the verge of tears about how Meghan's life has been made a misery. I think you'll find that everything that happened to Harry and Meghan is self-inflicted. His choices.
The article is under the spotlight, and each one could tip the balance of the entire case. The Daily Mail hasn't wavered in its defense at all. From the start, they've insisted the material came from legitimate sources, not shady tactics. In fact, they've pushed a bold angle, claiming that some of the information actually came from Harry's own circle. That flips the story completely, suggesting it wasn't aggressive digging, but people close to him sharing details that ended up in print. And if the judge agrees with that, then the whole unlawful claim starts to collapse. There's nothing illegal about journalists receiving information from willing sources, and that point could hit hard when the final decision lands. 𝗣𝗿𝗶𝗰𝗲, the Daily Mail's royal editor and a well-known figure in the field, stepped forward to directly challenge the accusations against her. She was accused of getting details about Harry's relationship with his then-girlfriend, Chelsea Davy, through improper methods, including a claim that she arranged for someone to sit near Chelsea on a flight to listen in on her conversations. That's a serious allegation. But English pushed back strongly. She called the claim deeply wrong and deeply offensive, making it clear she would never even think about doing something like that, then or now. She also pointed out a key detail. The email presented as supposed evidence had no reply from her, reinforcing her stance that she had never even seen it. Then came Paul Dacre, the former editor-in-chief of the Daily Mail, and his presence brought serious intensity. This is someone who ran the paper for 26 years and is known for not holding back. His testimony didn't soften anything. He described the allegations as grave and at times outright preposterous. He said they left him shocked and appalled, and even admitted that during long, late-night stretches, the situation pushed him into real anger. He made it clear he felt protective over his staff, saying he was genuinely upset on their behalf. It wasn't just testimony. It felt like a direct challenge being thrown down in court. On the other side, Harry framed the entire case in a much bigger way. In his testimony, he described what he sees as years of relentless targeting, a pattern of intrusion, obsession, and profit being made off his private life. He spoke about the feeling that everything he did, his actions, his thoughts, even his emotions, were constantly being watched and tracked, painting a picture of pressure that never let up. He described the experience as feeling like full-on stalking, constant surveillance that never switched off. According to Harry, it didn't just stay in the headlines, it got inside his personal life and started tearing things apart. He said it put massive pressure on his relationships, pushed him into paranoia, and even made him question the people closest to him, friends, bodyguards, wondering if they were the ones leaking information. That testimony hit with real emotion. There were moments where he looked like he might break down, and other moments where things got tense in a different way. At times, he lost composure in the witness box and even clashed with the judge, leading Justice Nicol to step in directly. The judge reminded him clearly that his role wasn't to argue the case, but to answer questions, something that doesn't usually need to be said unless things are starting to go off track. When a judge has to step in like that, it doesn't automatically decide the outcome. But it does get noticed. It becomes part of the bigger picture, shaping how the judge views the witness and how they handled the pressure of the courtroom. And then there's the deeper twist in all of this, the irony that's been hanging over the case from the start. Harry brought this lawsuit partly arguing that the press crossed serious lines, but the way the case has unfolded has raised questions that cut in unexpected directions, adding another layer of tension to an already intense legal battle. The core accusation here is that a newspaper invaded his privacy and turned his personal life into profit. But at the same time, there's a striking contrast that's hard to ignore. His own memoir reportedly brought in around $20 million, openly sharing deeply personal moments with the world. Then there's the documentary series, where private family details were laid out in front of a massive global Netflix audience. It doesn't stop there. Through podcast appearances, interviews, and public statements, there's been a steady stream of personal disclosures, stories, emotions, and inside accounts shared on a huge scale. All of it adds to a growing picture that feels complicated when placed next to the claims in court. So now you've got this tension at the center of the case. On one side, the argument is that private information was taken and monetized without consent. On the other, that same kind of personal detail has also been shared and turned into major commercial success. It's a contrast that stands out in a big way. That said, from a legal standpoint, this alone doesn't automatically cancel out his specific claims, but it definitely adds another layer the judge has to weigh carefully. It's important to understand, these two things can exist at the same time. Someone can choose to share parts of their private life publicly.
14 specific dates.
Too much. Does he drink too much? I mean, I will say that I think Harry's very out of shape. If I look at him now, I wonder about his lifestyle. It's rubbed off on him, and now he's furious and bitter and hates the world. Poor old 𝗣𝗿𝗶𝗰𝗲's going to need a detox after 10 weeks with the H-bomb, isn't he?
Someone
In the book. Es ist im Buch, man kann es lesen. Dahin. Es ist drin. Im Buch. Auf die Treppe schnell!
Aware of the wider context surrounding a case. Now all eyes are on the verdict, and it's not going to be a simple yes or no moment. The judge will go piece by piece, examining each of the 14 articles individually, deciding for or against on each one, and weighing everything based on what's more likely true than not. It's going to be detailed, layered, and very specific. But beyond money or public image, there's one thing that could matter more than anything else: credibility. What the judge says about Harry as a witness could shape how this entire case is remembered. The Charlotte Griffith situation, the Gavin Burroughs reversal, and Harry's emotional, at times confrontational moments in court all come into play here. Whether directly addressed or woven into the reasoning, these moments will be carefully examined. And when the judgment finally drops, those details are going to be the ones everyone zooms in on. This is the kind of judgment the entire royal watching world is waiting to read. Every line, every detail. The Daily Mail team is sitting confident. Harry is waiting for the outcome, and the judge is working straight through Easter to bring this massive case to its final moment. A case that, according to some, was never meant to be brought in the first place, is now right on the edge of its conclusion. No matter how it ends, these 11 weeks in court have already left a mark that won't fade anytime soon. Not because of one single shocking moment, but because of everything combined. The sheer weight of what's been said, revealed, and put on record inside the royal courts of justice. This isn't just a case anymore. It's part of a much bigger story that will follow Harry and Meghan for years. Over those weeks, everything came out into the open. Private messages were read aloud, witnesses took the stand, and in one dramatic twist, a key witness even rejected his own statement. The judge had to step in at times to steady the courtroom, while a senior editor openly spoke about his anger during intense late-night sessions. Piece by piece, it all built into something far bigger than anyone expected. Now it's almost over. The verdict is coming, and when it finally lands, it won't just answer who wins or loses. It will answer the bigger question hanging over everything. Was it worth it? Was taking this fight to court with all the cost, pressure, and exposure actually justified? That answer is about to become a lot clearer than anything that's been said publicly up to now, and once it's out, there's no taking it back. To really understand what's at stake here, you have to look at the legal engine driving the whole case, because this isn't just drama, it's a very specific type of claim. Harry's case is built around something called misuse of private information, and that puts it firmly in the civil court world, not criminal. That means it's not about guilt or innocence, it's about rights, balance, and what's considered acceptable under the law. This whole framework has evolved a lot in the UK, especially since the Human Rights Act came into force in 1998. At its core, the judge is being asked to weigh two powerful forces against each other. On one side, there's Article 8, the right to privacy. On the other, Article 10, the right to freedom of expression. And when those two collide like this, things can get complicated fast. In practical terms, Harry's legal team has to clear two major hurdles. First, they need to show that the information in those articles was genuinely private, that he had a reasonable expectation it wouldn't be made public. That's not automatic. It has to be proven. Second, and just as crucial, they have to show that the newspaper didn't get that information in a legitimate way. If it came through unlawful methods, that strengthens the claim. But if it came from normal journalistic sources, the whole argument starts to weaken. And that's exactly where this case gets intense. When it comes to the first issue, whether the information was actually private, Harry's case does have some solid ground to stand on. There are clear areas of his life that most people would agree should stay personal. Things like the details of his relationships, where he was at certain times, and private conversations with friends and family. Those aren't automatically public just because he's a well-known figure. But the real pressure point in this case is the second question. And this is where things start to get shaky. It all comes down to whether that information was obtained through unlawful means. And that's a much tougher argument to lock in. Harry's entire case against the Daily Mail leans heavily on the claim that the newspaper crossed serious legal lines to get their stories. We're talking about allegations like phone hacking, tapping landlines, using hidden listening devices, or even deception to pull information. These aren't small accusations. They're major claims that need strong proof. And here's the key. It's not enough to suggest these things might have happened. Harry has to convince the judge that more likely than not, one or more of these unlawful methods were actually used to obtain the exact details that appeared in the specific articles he's challenging. That's a high bar, even under the civil standard. This is exactly where the Gavin Burroughs situation becomes so critical. He was expected to be a central figure, someone with insider knowledge of the private. investigator world who could back up those claims and explain how information about Harry may have been gathered. His role wasn't minor. It was meant to directly support the core of the case. Burroughs didn't just step back. He completely rejected the statement tied to his name. He said it wasn't his signature, didn't recognize the document at all, and went as far as calling the case built around his supposed evidence fiction. That kind of reversal doesn't just hurt. It pulls out what looks like a major piece of the foundation holding the whole argument together. At the same time, the Daily Mail's counter-argument starts to gain more weight. Their claim that information about Harry came from people within his own circle isn't easy to shut down, especially if there's truth to it. In celebrity circles, this kind of thing happens more than people think. Friends, acquaintances, people at the same events, these connections often end up talking to journalists, and that flow of information can look suspicious from the outside, even when it's not illegal. From the outside, it might seem like the only way certain details could come out is through surveillance. But in reality, it can come from people who were simply there and chose to share what they knew. That's a key tension running through this case. Even Harry's own testimony touched on this. He admitted he had long suspected that people close to him, friends, even bodyguards, could have been the source of leaks about his private life. That kind of suspicion adds another layer to everything. And here's where it really matters. If the Daily Mail can convince the judge that this is what actually happened, that the information came from Harry's own circle and not from unlawful methods, then the core of the privacy claim starts to fall apart. Because without unlawful conduct, the legal argument loses its edge in a big way. The 14 articles being challenged aren't being treated as one big block. They're each getting their own spotlight, their own breakdown, their own judgment. Some may have stronger evidence behind them, while others might not hold up as well. The judge is going piece by piece, and it's completely possible, like Lady Colin Campbell suggested, that the final result could be split, with wins on some articles and losses on others.
Between my professional and my own personal life, as compared to my attending events as a journalist. She said the fact that Catherine was pregnant with her first child would have been big news. On the verge of tears, at times losing his temper, demonstrating that I think he's not right in his head. Right? I think he's lost his mind.
That shifted the tone. The credibility questions around Charlotte Griffith, the major setback with Gavin Burroughs rejecting his own statement, Paul Dacre's fiery response, and rebecca English firmly denying the allegations against her. All of this has built an evidentiary picture that the Daily Mail believes is strongly in its favor. But there's a bigger layer here that hasn't gotten enough attention, and it could have long-term impact. This case isn't just about one person or one newspaper. It sits inside a much larger story about celebrity privacy and the limits of the press. After the phone hacking scandal tied to the news of the world and the fallout that led to the 𝗣𝗿𝗶𝗰 inquiry, the entire media landscape in the UK shifted. New rules, stronger oversight, and evolving legal standards changed how far the press could go, and how public figures could fight back when lines were crossed. Harry's case was seen, at least in part, as another step in that ongoing shift. A chance to push boundaries further, to challenge how information is gathered and used. So if this case doesn't land in his favor, it won't just affect him. It could send a wider signal about where the limits of privacy claims stand today. By taking the Daily Mail to court and pushing the claim that unlawful methods were used, the idea was bigger than just one legal fight. The argument was that this case could help hold the press accountable, especially an industry that has in the past been accused of crossing serious lines to get stories about public figures. But here's where the stakes flip. If the case fails, if the judge decides the evidence doesn't actually prove those unlawful methods, then the impact could go in the complete opposite direction. Instead of strengthening lawful methods, then the impact could go in the complete opposite direction. Instead of strengthening accountability, it could weaken that push in a very public way. Think about it. A high-profile case backed by major legal firepower running for 11 weeks and still not proving the claims to the court's satisfaction. That doesn't just fade away quietly. It sends a message that, at least in this instance, the evidence of wrongdoing didn't hold up under serious legal scrutiny. And that's exactly why this case matters beyond Harry himself. It's not just personal, it feeds into the wider tension between celebrities, the media, and the legal system. If the Daily Mail comes out on top, it won't rewrite history or erase past scandals like phone hacking. But it will make a strong statement about these specific allegations, this specific case, and this specific claimant. And then there's the financial side, which can't be ignored. Legal battles like this in the English system come with serious costs, and if the outcome doesn't go Harry's way, the financial impact could be just as intense as the reputational one. In the English legal system, losing isn't just about the verdict, it hits the wallet hard too. The general rule is that the losing side pays a significant portion of the winner's legal costs, and in a case that's stretched across 11 intense weeks, those numbers can climb fast into the millions. Associated newspapers will have racked up huge expenses defending this case, and if Harry is ordered to cover a large share of those costs, on top of his own legal fees, the financial impact could be massive. This isn't a small penalty, it's the kind of outcome that can seriously shake even high-profile finances. There's already been talk about what that could mean in real terms. Some speculation suggests he might even have to consider selling assets, possibly including a stake in the Montecito property, just to meet a costs order of that scale. But that part isn't confirmed. It all depends on what the court actually orders and what his liquid assets really look like behind the scenes. And that's the key point. Headline deal figures don't always reflect what's actually available in cash. The true financial picture is often more complicated than it appears from the outside. What is clear, though, is that this case has already cost Harry a lot. Time, legal fees, public scrutiny, and the exposure of private details. It's all added up over the course of the proceedings. And if the ruling doesn't go his way, those costs won't just stop. They'll stack even higher. There's a reason why going after newspapers in court has traditionally been avoided. The risks are serious, and the people who advised against this move, whether from within royal circles, legal experts, or others, weren't speaking lightly. Those warnings were rooted in how tough and unforgiving cases like this can become once they fully play out. They weren't warning him for no reason. They understood exactly how risky this kind of case could get. They knew the process would dig deep, expose personal details, and bring uncomfortable truths into the open. They knew discovery would be tough, the outcome uncertain, and that losing wouldn't just sting. It would come with serious consequences. But Harry moved forward anyway, convinced his version of events would hold strong and that the evidence would back him up completely. That confidence, though, has been tested in ways that didn't seem expected when this all began. The Charlotte Griffith messages raised questions. The Gavin Burroughs situation shook a key part of the case. The judge stepping in to tell Harry to stay focused and answer questions added tension in the courtroom. A senior editor openly expressing anger and a major witness effectively pulling away from earlier claims, it all built into something far more complicated than planned. Now, none of this guarantees a total loss. Legal cases can surprise people all the time. What looks like a clear defeat can still turn into partial wins. The judge could side with Harry on some of the 14 articles while rejecting others. And while the Daily Mail may feel confident, that confidence isn't the same as certainty. But one thing is hard to ignore. The case hasn't unfolded the way Harry's team likely hoped. And no matter what the final ruling says, it will sit on top of a record that has already shaped a powerful narrative. That record includes the details about his connection with Charlotte Griffith, the way that relationship was described in court, the moment a key witness rejected his own statement, and the emotional, sometimes confrontational tone Harry brought into the witness box. All of that is now part of the public story, and it's not a simple one. The judge is working through Easter to bring this to a close, and the verdict is coming soon. When it arrives, it won't just settle a legal dispute, it will close a chapter on a much bigger story, a story about a prince who took on the press in court, and may have found himself just as closely examined in the process. Whether the final decision brings the vindication Harry was hoping for, or something far more uncomfortable, the answer is coming soon, and it's going to be public for everyone to see. But beyond the legal arguments and courtroom strategy, there's another layer here that often gets overlooked: the human side of it all. Harry didn't walk into court randomly. He came in because he genuinely believes he was wronged. Whatever the strength of the legal evidence, that belief is real and deeply rooted in his life experience. He grew up in a world where the press was always there, always watching, often crossing into spaces that felt personal. His movements, his relationships, even his private moments became headlines, and he had little control over any of it. And that history runs deep. The loss of his mother happened in circumstances tied, at least in part, to the intense relationship between public figures and the media. That kind of experience doesn't just fade, it shapes how someone sees the world. He's lived through the pressure of a media culture that can treat celebrity lives like open property, constantly watched and discussed. So the frustration, the anger, the need to push back, it all comes from somewhere real. The drive to hold institutions accountable, to challenge what he sees as wrongdoing toward him and his family, isn't something that can just be dismissed. At the same time, the courtroom is a different arena. Even when the motivation is personal and deeply felt, the outcome depends on evidence, legal standards, and how the case is built. And that's where things can become complicated. What makes this case feel especially heavy is that tension, the gap between a very real personal experience and the strict demands of the legal system. And that's where the human side of this story really stands out. What really stands out here is the gap between what Harry set out to achieve and what this case has actually delivered. He went to court aiming for accountability, trying to prove that the Daily Mail used unlawful methods and to get a clear legal acknowledgement of that wrongdoing. But what unfolded took a different turn. Instead of only putting the newspaper under the microscope, the proceedings opened up a detailed public examination of Harry himself. His actions, his credibility, even private messages from years ago pulled into the spotlight. He stepped into court to hold the press accountable and ended up being held to the same level of scrutiny. And that shift isn't about bias or power. It's how litigation works, no matter who you are. Court cases don't just test one side. They dig into everything. They force disclosure, they challenge narratives, and they put the claimant's version of events under just as much pressure as the defense. No detail is too small when everything is being questioned. That's exactly why lawsuits against major newspapers have always been approached with caution. People experienced in this space understand the risk. Because once the process starts, it doesn't just expose the target, it exposes everyone involved. And that's the hard reality at the center of this case. Litigation doesn't just aim to prove a point, it puts the entire story from every angle out in the open. It seems clear that Harry either didn't fully grasp the risks going in or relied on advice that overestimated how strong his case really was. Because what these proceedings have shown is something very different. The case may not have been as solid as expected, while the risks of going to court played out exactly as they always do. 11 weeks in that environment isn't nothing. Being in the witness box, having your credibility questioned, your private messages pulled into the open, and watching a key witness reject their own statement, that kind of experience hits hard. The real question now is whether any of this changes how he approaches accountability and transparency moving forward, or if it doesn't. From what we've seen, it might not slow things down at all. His Washington, D.C. speech suggests the broader campaign is still in motion, still pushing forward regardless of what the court decides. The direction may already be set, like something massive that doesn't turn easily once it's moving. But this case will end. That part is certain. The verdict is coming, and when it lands, Harry will be left with decisions that go far beyond the courtroom. What does he do next? How does he engage publicly after a legal fight that's been more exposing and more difficult than expected? And those choices don't exist in a vacuum. They sit alongside bigger pressures, a financial situation that may be tighter than headlines suggest, and family relationships that remain strained and unresolved. All of that feeds into what comes next. Because in the end, the future of this story won't be shaped by public statements or big stage appearances. It will come down to private decisions, quiet, behind closed doors, far from cameras and press teams, made in places like Montecito where the real thinking happens. Right now, the judge is still writing the decision, and Harry is left waiting. But no matter what the final ruling says, one thing is already locked in: the experience itself, the pressure, the exposure, the cost of going through this. That's already part of the outcome, and it's something that can't be undone. That long-standing convention about not suing newspapers wasn't random. It existed for a reason, and after 11 intense weeks in court, that reason feels a lot clearer now than it did at the start of this case. But now, it's almost over. The finish line is right there, and the verdict is coming soon. When it arrives, it won't just close the case. It will add one more major chapter to an already complicated and highly public story. The judge will have the final say on the legal questions, that part is clear. But outside the courtroom, there's another force at play. The court of public opinion has been watching every twist, every reveal, every moment of tension. And people will draw their own conclusions no matter what the ruling says. And then there's Harry himself, Wherever he is when that decision drops, he'll be the one who has to figure out what comes next. What does he do with the outcome? How does he move forward from something this big, this public, this intense? Because at the center of it all is someone who still believes strongly in what he's doing, that his campaign, despite everything, is on the right side of history. Whether that belief holds up over time isn't something a judge can decide. That's something only the future will answer. For now, the judge is still working through Easter, putting the final pieces together. The verdict is on its way, and the story, with all its complexity, fallout, and real human impact, is still unfolding.